A night like any other, the fluorescent lights in the emergency room cast their harsh white glow across the linoleum floors. For Olivia Bennett, this was just another shift at Mercy General Hospital. She had been working as an ER nurse for 6 years now, and the controlled chaos of Saturday nights had become her normal. The waiting room was packed with the usual mix of injuries and illnesses. Children with fevers, adults with mysterious pains, and the occasional accident victim kept the staff moving at a constant pace. Olivia stood at the nurse's station, updating patient charts on the computer. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her scrubs were decorated with cheerful cartoon hearts. She believed in bringing a little joy to people during their worst moments. At 28 years old, she had learned to balance professional competence with genuine compassion. Her colleagues often said she had a gift for making patients feel safe and cared for, even in the middle of medical emergencies. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night. Olivia's shift had started at 3 in the afternoon, and she still had several hours to go. Her feet ached in her comfortable nursing shoes, but she had learned long ago to ignore physical discomfort. That was part of the job. She reached for the lukewarm coffee sitting beside her keyboard, taking a quick sip before returning to her paperwork. When everything changes, the automatic doors burst open with a pneumatic whoosh. A middle-aged man rushed in, supporting an elderly gentleman who looked pale and unsteady. The older man's face was covered in a sheen of sweat, and his breathing came in short, labored gasps. Olivia's trained eyes immediately assessed the situation. She abandoned her computer and moved quickly toward them. "Please help," the younger man said, his voice tight with worry. "My father, he started having chest pains about 20 minutes ago. They're getting worse." Olivia didn't waste time with questions. She could see the classic signs of cardiac distress. The gray pallor of the skin, the difficulty breathing, the way the elderly man clutched his left arm. Every second mattered in situations like this. She called out to her colleague, "Get me a wheelchair now. And alert Dr. Wilson, we have a possible heart attack coming in." Within moments, they had Richard Ashford, as his driver's license would soon reveal. Settled in an examination room, Olivia moved with practiced efficiency, attaching monitors, starting an IV line, and administering oxygen. Her hands were steady, her voice calm and reassuring as she explained each step to the frightened patient. She could hear the fear in Richard's breathing, see it in his eyes, but she knew that her composure would help him stay calm. "You're doing great, Richard," she said softly, checking his vital signs. "Just focus on taking slow, deep breaths for me. We're taking good care of you." The heart monitor showed irregular rhythms that made Olivia's stomach clench with concern, but her face remained serene. She had learned early in her career that patients could sense fear, and right now, Richard needed confidence, not panic. Dr. Wilson arrived within minutes, and together they worked to stabilize the situation. The older physician barked orders while Olivia executed them with precision. The son, who watches James Ashford, stood in the corner of the examination room, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his entire life. At 34 years old, he was accustomed to being in control. He ran a successful technology company, managed investments worth millions, and was known for his ability to handle high-pressure situations with cool logic. But watching his father struggle for breath, seeing the medical team work frantically to save him, stripped away all his usual confidence. His eyes kept returning to the nurse with the kind eyes and steady hands. Olivia, her name tag read. She moved around his father with a grace that seemed almost choreographed, anticipating needs before they were spoken, providing comfort with a touch on the shoulder or a gentle word. James noticed how she explained everything she was doing in simple terms, never talking down to his father, but making the medical procedures less frightening. "Your father is stable now," Dr. Wilson said, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. "We're admitting him for observation and further tests. It appears he had a minor heart attack, but we caught it early thanks to Nurse Bennett's quick response." James felt his knees go weak with relief. His father, his mentor, his best friend, was going to be okay. He turned to find Olivia, wanting to thank her, but she had already moved on to another patient. He caught only a glimpse of her disappearing through the curtain into the next bay, already focused on the next person who needed her help. Seeds of gratitude, 3 days later. Richard Ashford was recovering well in a private room on the cardiac care floor. The crisis had passed, and the doctors were optimistic about his prognosis with proper medication and lifestyle changes. James had barely left his father's side, working from his laptop and sleeping in the uncomfortable visitor's chair. His business partner had taken over the day-to-day operations. Understanding that family came first, it was during one of these long afternoons that Olivia stopped by to check on her former patient. She wasn't assigned to the cardiac floor, but she made a habit of following up on the critical cases she handled in the ER. It gave her closure to see patients recovering, to know that her emergency interventions had made a lasting difference. "Hello there," Richard said, his face brightening when he saw her. "If it isn't my guardian angel," Olivia smiled, approaching the bed to check his chart. "I'm no angel, just a nurse doing her job. But I'm so glad to see you looking better. Your color is much improved." James stood up from his chair in the corner, where he had been reviewing financial reports. Seeing Olivia again, in the softer light of the recovery room, rather than the harsh emergency lighting, he was struck by how genuinely beautiful she was. Not in the polished, high-maintenance way of the women he usually met at corporate events, but in a natural, unaffected way that made his heart do an unexpected flip. "Thank you," James said, extending his hand. "I don't think I properly thanked you the other night." "You saved my father's life." Olivia shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the sincerity in his eyes. "You're welcome. I'm just glad I was there when you needed help." An unexpected connection. After Olivia left, Richard looked at his son with a knowing smile. "She's something special, that one." James nodded, still thinking about the warmth of her smile and the competence she radiated. "She certainly is. So why are you still standing here?" Richard asked, raising an eyebrow. "Go find out if she's single." James laughed, shaking his head. "Dad, she's a professional who was doing her job. I can't just ask her out. Why not?" Richard challenged. "Life is short, son. I just had a very clear reminder of that. If you meet someone who makes you feel something, you should pursue it." James sat back down, but his father's words stayed with him. That evening, he found himself thinking about Olivia's kind eyes and capable hands. He thought about how she had made his father laugh even while inserting an IV, how she had treated a scared old man with dignity and respect. Before he could overthink it, he pulled out his phone and called the hospital's main number. "I'd like to send some flowers to one of your nurses," he said. "Her name is Olivia Bennett." The next morning, Olivia arrived for her shift to find a beautiful arrangement waiting at the nurse's station. It wasn't the typical dozen red roses. Instead, it was a wildflower bouquet filled with sunflowers, daisies, and lavender. The card read simply, "Thank you for your extraordinary care. You made the worst night of my life bearable. Richard and James Ashford." Her co-worker, Monica, whistled appreciatively. "Someone has an admirer. Those are gorgeous." Olivia felt her cheeks warm as she read the card again. It was thoughtful and personal, not the generic thank you that family members sometimes sent. She tucked the card into her scrub pocket, telling herself it was just a grateful patient and his son expressing appreciation. Nothing more. But that evening, when her phone rang with an unknown number, something made her answer instead of letting it go to voicemail. "Hello, Olivia. This is James Ashford." Her heart did an unexpected skip. "Hi, James. How's your father doing?" "He's doing great, thanks to you," James said. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I wanted to thank you properly. Would you be willing to have dinner with me?" Olivia hesitated, her professional instincts warning her about getting involved with a patient's family member. But there was something about his voice, a sincerity and warmth that made her want to say yes. "Just dinner?" she asked. "Just dinner," he confirmed. "No pressure, no expectations. Just two people sharing a meal and conversation." Olivia smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. "Okay, James, just dinner." As she hung up the phone, she had no idea that this simple decision would change her entire life. She didn't know that James Ashford was the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country, or that their connection would thrust her into a world of wealth and privilege she had never imagined. All she knew was that she had just agreed to dinner with a man who made her smile, and for now, that was enough. The restaurant that stopped Tim Olivia stood in front of her closet, feeling more nervous than she had felt in years. It was just dinner, she kept telling herself. Just a simple, thank you dinner with a grateful son. But as she tried on her third dress, she couldn't shake the feeling that this evening might be more significant than she was admitting to herself. She finally settled on a navy blue dress that her sister had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. It was elegant without being too formal, and it made her feel confident. She applied light makeup, reminding herself that she was overtaking this. It was just dinner with a nice man whose father she had helped. Nothing extraordinary about that. When the car arrived to pick her up, Olivia expected a regular taxi or rideshare vehicle. Instead, a sleek black town car pulled up to her apartment building. The driver, wearing a professional suit, stepped out and opened the door for her. Olivia felt her first twinge of uncertainty as she slid into the leather interior. This was more formal than she had anticipated. The drive took them through the city center, past the theater district, and into an area known for upscale dining. When they pulled up in front of Bellissimo, one of the most acclaimed restaurants in the city, Olivia felt her stomach flip. She had read about this place in magazines. Reservations were supposedly impossible to get, and the prices were astronomical. This was not the casual neighborhood bistro she had imagined. James was waiting outside, looking handsome in a tailored charcoal suit with no tie. His face lit up when he saw her step out of the car. "Olivia, you look beautiful," he said warmly, offering his arm. "Thank you," she managed, trying to calm her racing heart. "This place is quite fancy. I hope I'm dressed appropriately." "You're perfect," James assured her, guiding her toward the entrance. "I wanted to take you somewhere special, to properly thank you." But when they stepped inside, Olivia stopped in confusion. The restaurant was completely empty. Every table was set with pristine white linens, fresh flowers, and gleaming silverware, but there was not a single other guest. Only a small staff of waiters stood at attention, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. "Where is everyone?" Olivia asked, looking around in bewilderment. James had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "I reserved the entire restaurant for the evening. I wanted us to be able to talk without interruption or distraction." Olivia stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. "You reserved the entire restaurant? How is that even possible?" "I know it seems excessive," James said quickly, sensing her shock. "I just thought it would be nice to have privacy. We can leave if you're uncomfortable. We can go anywhere you want." The gesture was so extravagant it bordered on absurd, yet there was something endearing about his nervousness. He genuinely seemed to want her to feel comfortable, even if his method was completely over the top. Olivia made a decision to embrace the experience rather than let her discomfort ruin the evening. "No, it's okay," she said, allowing a smile. "I've just never been the only customer in a restaurant before. It's definitely memorable." Discovering the truth that dinner was extraordinary. Course after course of expertly prepared food arrived at their table, each dish more delicious than the last. But the real magic was in the conversation. James was funny and charming, with a self-deprecating sense of humor that made Olivia laugh until her sides hurt. He asked about her work, genuinely interested in the challenges and rewards of nursing. He wanted to know about her family, her hobbies, her dreams. "I've always wanted to work in pediatric oncology," Olivia admitted during dessert. "Children with cancer need so much more than medical care. They need hope and joy and someone to make them feel like they're still kids, not just patients." James looked at her with such admiration, it made her blush. "That takes incredible strength. Most people couldn't handle that kind of emotional weight." "What about you?" Olivia asked, eager to shift the focus. "What do you do when you're not visiting your father in the hospital?" "I work in technology," James said vaguely. "My family has a company that does logistics and software solutions. It's not as meaningful as what you do, but it keeps me busy." The evening passed in what felt like minutes. When James drove her home in his own car, a vehicle Olivia noticed was extremely nice, but didn't recognize the brand. She felt like she was floating. They talked easily during the drive, and when he walked her to her apartment door, the connection between them felt electric. "I had a wonderful time tonight," James said softly. "Would you like to do this again?" "I'd love that," Olivia replied, meaning it completely. After he left, Olivia curled up on her couch, replaying the evening in her mind. Something nagged at her, though. The private restaurant, the expensive car, the way the staff had treated James with such deference. Who was this man, really? She opened her laptop and typed his name into the search bar. James Ashford. The results that flooded her screen made her heart stop. Headlines from business magazines, society pages, and news websites filled the page. Ashford Technology Empire? Billionaire heir James Ashford? Is the man behind a fortune worth billions? Olivia clicked through article after article, her shock growing with each one. James wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the richest men in the country. His family's company employed thousands of people worldwide. There were photos of him at charity, galas, business conferences, and exclusive events. This was not the modest technology worker he had described over dinner. Her phone rang, making her jump. It was James. "Hi," she answered, her voice shakier than she intended. "Hi," James said warmly. "I just wanted to make sure you got home safely and to say again what a great time I had tonight." "Why didn't you tell me?" Olivia asked, unable to keep the question inside. There was a long pause. "You looked me up," he said quietly. "It wasn't a question. Of course I looked you up," Olivia said. "You closed an entire restaurant for dinner. That's not something a normal person does. James, you're a billionaire." She heard him sigh deeply. "Yes, I am. And I didn't tell you because I wanted you to get to know me, not my bank account. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to watch people's faces change the moment they learn about my family's money? Their whole demeanor shifts. They start seeing dollar signs instead of a person." His voice was heavy with a loneliness that Olivia recognized. She thought about her own protective walls, the ones she had built around her heart after too many disappointments. Maybe they weren't so different after all. "I understand," she said softly. "I do, but no more secrets, okay? If we're going to see each other again, I need honesty." "No more secrets," James agreed, relief evident in his voice. "Does this mean you're still willing to see me?" Olivia smiled, despite her lingering shock. "Yes, but under one condition. Next time, I pick the restaurant. Somewhere I can actually afford to buy my own meal." James laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Deal." A different kind of date for their second date. Olivia chose Rosa's Trattoria, a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from her apartment. It was family-owned, always busy, and served the best homemade pasta in the city. The tables were close together, the noise level was high, and the prices were reasonable. It was the complete opposite of their first date. Olivia wanted to see how James would handle it. To her surprise and delight, he'd fit in perfectly. He didn't complain about the lack of privacy or the cramped seating. Instead, he chatted easily with the owner's daughter, who served as their waitress, complimented the house wine, and seemed genuinely happy to be there. They shared a plate of spaghetti carbonara and laughed over stories from their childhoods. Halfway through dinner, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Olivia, hey, I didn't know you came here." Olivia looked up to see Trevor Washington, one of the residents she worked with at the hospital. He was there with his wife, and they had just been seated at the next table. "Trevor, hi. This is my friend James. James, this is Dr. Washington. We work together." Trevor shook James's hand, his eyes widening slightly in recognition. James Ashford. From Ashford Technologies? The atmosphere at the table shifted subtly. Trevor's casual friendliness transformed into something more formal, more impressed. "Mr. Ashford, it's an honor to meet you. I've read about your company's work in healthcare technology. It's revolutionary." James smiled politely, but Olivia could see the slight tension in his shoulders. "Thank you, doctor. Please, just call me James." After Trevor returned to his own table, stealing occasional glances their way, James looked at Olivia with a rueful expression. "See what I mean? Everything changes once people know." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand. "Not everything. I still see you, James, just you." Us. Entering his world 2 weeks later, James invited Olivia to a charity gala his family was hosting to raise money for the children's hospital. She almost said no, intimidated by the prospect of entering his world of wealth and privilege. But the cause was something she cared deeply about, and she wanted to support James, so she agreed. The gala was held in a grand hotel ballroom that had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkling light over women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos. Olivia wore a simple black dress she had splurged on for the occasion, but even so, she felt underdressed and out of place. James never left her side, his hand a constant reassuring presence on her back. He introduced her to business associates and family friends, always with pride in his voice. "This is Olivia Bennett. She's a nurse at Mercy General. She saved my father's life." Most people were polite, asking superficial questions about her work before moving on to discuss topics Olivia knew nothing about. Stock markets, real estate investments, vacation homes, and places she had only seen in travel magazines. She smiled and nodded, feeling increasingly like an imposter in a world where she didn't belong. Then came the encounter that would change everything. A woman in a glittering gold gown and dripping with diamonds approached them. Her face was frozen in an expression of permanent surprise, courtesy of too much cosmetic work, and her eyes were cold as they swept over Olivia. "James, darling," the woman said, air kissing near his cheeks. "I haven't seen you in ages. And who is this lovely creature you've brought?" "Mrs. Pemberton. This is Olivia Bennett," James said. His voice carefully neutral. Mrs. Pemberton's gaze traveled slowly over Olivia's dress. Her simple jewelry, her understated hair and makeup. The assessment was thorough and insulting. "Bennett, I don't believe I know that family name. Where are you from, dear?" "I grew up in the suburbs," Olivia replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm a nurse at Mercy General Hospital." "A nurse," Mrs. Pemberton repeated, as if Olivia had said she was a janitor. "How quaint. And that dress, where did you find it?" "It's so refreshingly simple." The insult was thinly veiled, and Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Before she could respond, James stepped forward, his voice cutting and cold. "Olivia's dress is perfect because she doesn't need expensive labels to be beautiful. She spends her time saving lives, instead of worrying about designer names. It's one of the many things I admire about her." Mrs. Pemberton's face stiffened even further. "Well, I never." "Perhaps you should," James said firmly. "Excuse us." He guided Olivia away, through the crowd, and out onto a terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool and refreshing after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. Olivia's hands were shaking, and she felt tears of humiliation burning behind her eyes. "I'm so sorry," James said, turning to face her. "That woman is a judgmental snob who has nothing better to do than tear other people down." "She's right, though," Olivia said quietly. "I don't belong in this world. James, I can't compete with women who spend thousands on dresses and know the difference between good champagne and great champagne. I'm just a regular person." James took her face in his hands, his eyes intense. "You're not just anything, Olivia. You're extraordinary. You're real and kind and brave. These people in there with their expensive clothes and perfect manners, most of them have never done anything meaningful in their entire lives. You save lives every single day." "But it's not enough in your world," Olivia whispered. "Then maybe my world needs to change," James said fiercely. "I don't care what they think. I care about you." And then he kissed her. It was soft and sweet and filled with promise. Under the stars, with the city lights twinkling below them, Olivia felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe love could bridge the gap between their different worlds. When everything falls apart, the photograph appeared online the next morning. Someone at the gala had captured their kiss on the terrace and sold it to a gossip website. The headline read, "Billionaire Bachelor James Ashford off the market? Mystery woman identified as hospital nurse." Olivia woke up to dozens of messages from friends and coworkers. Her phone was ringing constantly with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. When she looked at the news sites, she felt sick. The story had spread everywhere. Photos of her leaving the gala with James, articles speculating about their relationship, comments from strangers dissecting everything from her appearance to her motives. At the hospital, the atmosphere was strange. Colleagues looked at her differently, some with envy, others with a new wariness. Patients recognized her from the photos and asked intrusive questions. The attention was overwhelming and unwanted. The worst came a week later. Olivia's best friend, Rachel, had been feeling sick and worried she might be pregnant. She was terrified and asked Olivia to come with her to buy a pregnancy test. Being a good friend, Olivia agreed. She went to a pharmacy across town, bought the test for Rachel, and thought nothing of it. But someone had followed her. A photographer looking for any story about James Ashford's new girlfriend had been tailing her for days. The photo was damning. Olivia at the pharmacy counter, a pregnancy test clearly visible in her hand. A small smile on her face as she paid. The story exploded. Gold digger alert. James Ashford's nurse girlfriend buying pregnancy test. The articles painted her as a calculating woman who had deliberately trapped a billionaire. They said she had targeted Richard Ashford, using his medical emergency as an opportunity to seduce his wealthy son. They claimed she was now pregnant and planning to secure her financial future. Every cruel, vicious assumption possible was printed as fact. Olivia's professional reputation was attacked. Her personal life was torn apart. Strangers left hateful comments online, calling her terrible names and making threats. The harassment was relentless and brutal. James was furious. He wanted to sue every publication, release statements, use his money and power to destroy the people who were hurting her. But Olivia, who had spent years managing crisis situations, knew that fighting would only make it worse. "It will blow over," she told him, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "These stories always do." But it didn't blow over. It got worse. The second crisis Sunday dinner at the Ashford estate should have been peaceful. Richard was fully recovered and back to his energetic self. He had insisted on hosting Olivia and James at his home. Wanting to properly welcome the woman who had saved his life and captured his son's heart, the house was beautiful, a sprawling mansion filled with art and antiques. But the atmosphere was warm and welcoming rather than intimidating. Richard treated Olivia like family, telling embarrassing stories about James's childhood and making her laugh until her sides hurt. This boy was absolutely terrified of thunderstorms until he was 12, Richard said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. He would hide under his bed and refuse to come out. "Dad, please," James groaned. But he was smiling. They were in the middle of dessert when Richard's face suddenly changed. His hand flew to his chest, and he made a gasping sound. The color drained from his face, and before anyone could react, he slumped forward in his chair. "Dad," James shouted, jumping to his feet. But Olivia was already moving. Her training kicked in immediately, overriding the shock and fear. "Call 911 now," she commanded, gently lowering Richard to the floor. "James, I need you to get the first aid kit from your car." She checked Richard's pulse, found it weak but present, and tilted his head back to ensure his airway was clear. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, loosening his collar, checking his breathing, monitoring his vital signs. She spoke calmly to Richard, even though he was unconscious, knowing that hearing could be the last sense to go. "Hey, you're okay, Richard. Help is coming. Just hang on for me." The ambulance arrived within minutes, but those minutes felt like hours. Olivia stayed with Richard, keeping him stable, providing critical information to the paramedics. At the hospital, while the doctors worked on Richard, she sat with James in the waiting room, holding his hand as he fell apart. "I can't lose him," James whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He's all I have." "You're not going to lose him," Olivia said firmly. "He's strong, and he's getting the best care possible." Richard had suffered another heart attack, more severe than the first. He needed emergency surgery, and the next few hours would be critical. Olivia stayed by James's side through all of it. Being his rock when he had no strength left, the breaking point the morning after Richard's surgery, while he was stable and recovering in intensive care, Olivia went home to shower and change. She was exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline. As she walked to her car in the hospital parking garage, she didn't notice the group of photographers lurking in the shadows. They descended on her like a pack of wolves. Cameras flashed in her face, microphones were shoved toward her, aggressive questions came from all sides.
"Oh,
"Miss Bennett, Is it true you're pregnant with James Ashford's baby? Did you deliberately target the Ashford family? How does it feel to be a gold digger? Are you trying to trap a billionaire? Olivia froze, overwhelmed by the assault. The lights were blinding, the voices were hostile, and she couldn't move. Her breath came in short gasps, panic rising in her chest. She felt trapped, hunted, violated. Then James was there. He had followed her out, worried about her driving home alone in her exhausted state. He pushed through the photographers with barely contained rage, wrapping a protective arm around Olivia and shielding her with his body. "Get away from her," he snarled, his voice dangerous. "If any of you touch her or come near her again, I will sue you into oblivion. Move." He got her into his car and drove away, but the damage was done. Olivia sat in the passenger seat, shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. The fear and humiliation of the past weeks crashed over her all at once. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "I can't live like this, James. They've turned me into a villain. They've made me hate my own life." James pulled over, his own hands shaking with fury and fear. "I'll fix this. I'll make them pay for what they've done to you. I have the best lawyers in the country." "No," Olivia said, looking at him with heartbroken eyes. "Don't you see? Fighting them only makes it worse. Your world is destroying me, James. I'm losing myself." "What are you saying?" James asked, though he feared he already knew. "I need space," Olivia whispered. "I need to step away from all of this and figure out who I am again. I'm sorry." Separation. The next 2 weeks were the longest of James's life. He threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the empty space Olivia had left. He visited his father every day, grateful beyond measure that Richard was recovering well. But nothing filled the void she had created. For Olivia, the days were equally difficult. The media attention gradually faded when she stopped appearing in public with James. She returned to her normal routine at the hospital, but everything felt different. She had fallen in love with James, and walking away from him felt like cutting off a part of herself. Late one night, unable to sleep, Olivia was curled up on her couch when her doorbell rang. She almost didn't answer, but something made her look through the peephole. James stood on the other side, looking tired and desperate. She opened the door, and for a moment they just stared at each other. "I know you asked for space," James said quietly, "and I've tried to give it to you. But I can't do this anymore, Olivia. Living without you isn't living. It's just existing." "James," Olivia began, but he held up his hand. "I have an idea. Run away with me for the weekend. No phones, no media, no pressure. Just you and me in a place where nobody knows my last name or cares about my bank account. Let me show you that we can have a normal relationship if we choose to." Olivia knew she should say no. A weekend away wouldn't solve their fundamental problems. But looking at James's hopeful face, feeling the pull of her own heart, she couldn't resist. "Okay," she whispered. One weekend, the cabin by the lake, they drove north for hours, leaving the city far behind. James took her to a rustic cabin on a quiet lake, a place his grandparents had built decades ago. There was no internet, no television, just peace and nature and each other for 2 days. They lived in a bubble outside of reality. They cooked simple meals together, took long walks around the lake, and talked about everything except the problems waiting for them back home. James chopped firewood while Olivia read on the porch. They went swimming in the cold lake water and warmed up afterward by the fireplace. On the second night, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Olivia finally voiced the fear that had been haunting her. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "But it's not real life, James. We can't hide here forever." "I know," James agreed. "But it proves that we can be happy together. That what we have is real. Is it enough, though?" Olivia asked, looking at him with sad eyes. "Can love really overcome everything we're up against? Your world will never accept me. The media will always be waiting to tear me down. I'll always be the outsider who doesn't belong." James was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm with conviction. "Then I'll leave my world behind." Olivia's head snapped toward him. "What?" "I mean it," James said, turning to face her fully. I've been thinking about this for weeks. That world, the galas, and the society pages, and the expectations, I never chose it. I was born into it. But I can choose to leave it. James, you can't just walk away from your entire life, Olivia protested. Why not? James challenged. I can step back from the public face of the company. I can work behind the scenes doing the actual job I love without all the attention. We can build a life somewhere quiet, somewhere normal. I don't need the mansion or the fancy cars or the exclusive restaurants. I just need you. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. You would really do that? Give up everything for me? In a heartbeat, James said, taking her hands in his. Because here's what I've learned in the past month. All the money and success in the world means nothing if I can't share it with someone I love. You're more important than any of that. You're everything. Olivia felt something shift inside her. She had been so focused on all the reasons their relationship couldn't work that she had lost sight of the one reason it should. They loved each other. Really, truly loved each other. And maybe that was enough. I don't want you to give up your life, Olivia said carefully. But maybe we can find a middle ground. Maybe we can figure out how to be together without letting the outside world define us. James pulled her close, kissing her forehead. We can figure out anything as long as we're together. Standing together, they returned to the city on Sunday evening, and James immediately called a press conference for Monday morning. Olivia tried to talk him out of it, but he was determined. If they were going to move forward, they needed to address the media storm head-on. The conference room at Ashford Technologies was packed with reporters. Cameras flashed as James took the podium, Olivia standing beside him. He had written a statement, but when the moment came, he set it aside and spoke from the heart. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice clear and strong. I want to address the rumors and speculation that have been circulating about my personal life. Yes, I am in a relationship with Olivia Bennett. Yes, she was the nurse who saved my father's life. And no, she is not pregnant, not a gold digger, and not any of the terrible things that have been written about her. He paused, looking at Olivia with such love that several reporters in the front row actually sighed. Olivia is a dedicated healthcare professional who has devoted her life to helping others. She's kind, intelligent, compassionate, and the best person I've ever known. I'm not going to apologize for loving her. I'm not going to hide our relationship because some people think we don't fit together. He turned to address the cameras directly. To the photographers who have been harassing her, to the publications that have printed lies about her character, you should be ashamed. You've targeted a woman whose only crime was being excellent at her job and agreeing to have dinner with me. This ends now. Any further harassment will be met with legal action. Any further defamatory articles will result in lawsuits. I will use every resource at my disposal to protect the woman I love. He looked back at Olivia, his voice softening. And to anyone who thinks she's with me for my money, you're welcome to that opinion. But you're wrong. She tried to walk away from me because of my money. She wanted nothing to do with the wealth or the attention. She just wanted me, the regular guy who happened to fall for an extraordinary woman. The room erupted with questions, but James ignored them. He took Olivia's hand and walked out, leaving the reporters to write whatever story they wanted. He had said what needed to be said 1 year later. Late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the small house James and Olivia had bought together. It wasn't a mansion. It was a comfortable 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, close enough to the hospital for Olivia's commute, but far enough from the city. Sent her to feel peaceful. Olivia was in the kitchen, making dinner and laughing at something on her phone. James stood in the doorway, just watching her, still amazed that this was his life now. After the press conference, the media attention had gradually faded. There were still occasional articles or photos, but nothing like the feeding frenzy of that first month. James had stepped back from the public-facing aspects of Ashford Technologies, taking on a more behind-the-scenes role that allowed him to do the work he loved without the constant scrutiny. He went to the office in jeans and took the subway instead of a private car. He was happier than he had ever been. Richard had made a full recovery and had become Olivia's biggest champion. He visited their house regularly, always bringing flowers for Olivia, and complaints about his restricted diet that made her laugh. The bond between them was deep and genuine. "What are you smiling about?" Olivia asked, noticing James watching her. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," James said, walking over to wrap his arms around her waist. "We both are," Olivia agreed. Leaning back against him, they had learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. It was about choosing each other every day, about building a life together that honored both of their values, about finding happiness in simple moments like making dinner together on a Tuesday evening. The doorbell rang, and James went to answer it. It was Rachel, Olivia's best friend, along with her husband and their new baby. The pregnancy test that had caused such chaos a year ago had been for Rachel after all. And now she was a proud new mother, as the small house filled with friends and laughter. Olivia looked around at the life she and James had built together. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself a year ago. It was better. It was real. It was theirs. And when James caught her eye across the room and smiled, that same warm smile that had first captured her heart, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right choice. Love hadn't conquered all their challenges easily. It had been hard work, compromise, and determination. But it had been worth every difficult moment.